Scully Productions.
What's up, Joe? What's up, everybody? Jeff Fannell, Sports360. Well. After weeks and weeks of negotiations, Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association were unable to come to an agreement to start the 2020 Major League Baseball season. Now, Rob Manfred, the Commissioner of Baseball, will implement a 60-game schedule, and that's being done unilaterally. So many of the moving parts that were on the table during the negotiation, things like expanded playoffs, like DH for the next 2 seasons, uniform patches, and other things, are now off the table. And so it looks like right now that we might have Major League Baseball this season. Why do I say might? Well, I'll explain that in a couple of minutes, but first I have to say this. There were weeks of contentious negotiations playing out in the media, back and forth, both sides, dug in on their positions, strong in their beliefs, in their positions, and so forth. And it's understandable, that with so much at stake, that the negotiations would be intense. But having said that, I believe that it was a bad look for the game. And look, I'm saying this as someone who worked for the Major League Baseball Players Association for 10 years as a staff lawyer, as someone who still serves as a consultant to the PA, and as someone who's in close contact with many people at the union. But I believe this, that there are people who were closely involved with the negotiations, right on the front lines, who would say the same thing. This was a bad look for the game. And the reason why is simple. Because these negotiations were taking place against the backdrop of a pandemic that is still gripping this country, taking place against the backdrop of 40 million people who have filed for unemployment. Businesses are closing, people are losing their jobs. It's taken place against the backdrop of civil uprising in our streets following the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, and others. And against that backdrop, we have arguments and fights, and we have owners talking about baseball not being profitable and making those types of statements when so many people in this country are struggling and are suffering in ways that we haven't seen in quite some time. It was a bad look. And again, I'm not the only one who would say that, but even if I was, I would say it. It was a bad look. So why did we have it? Well, first of all, some people may say, well, why were players so staunch in their demand for fully prorated salaries? Well, first of all, the reason why is because that was part of the agreement that they reached with Major League Baseball. In that agreement that they reached with baseball back in March, right, the players and the league put into writing the following. If and when conditions exist for the commencement of the 2020 championship season, all players signed to a major league contract shall be paid a daily rate for each day of major league service based on the following formula. And the formula then set forth for prorated salaries. That was the agreement. The players knew they agreed to that, and they weren't willing to come off of that. And you say, why not? Well, because don't forget that they already have lost billions of dollars, right? Because players have not been paid a salary yet. And so players have lost over half the season. And when you consider that Major League salaries this season was somewhere in the neighborhood of $4.5 billion, players lost over $2 billion in salary already. And then they agreed to have prorated salaries, whether there's 50 games, 60 games, 70 games, 80 games, you pick them. But they agreed, and Major League Baseball agreed, that they get prorated salaries. And that's why in the end, Major League Baseball conceded the point. So part of the reason that the players were pushing for it is, one, they agreed to it. Second, they already lost billions of dollars. But there's a third reason too. When they're being asked to come back, it may be a shortened season, but they're going to be putting in full days of work. And what man or what woman who puts in a full day of work in the United States of America doesn't expect a full day of pay? So this is not something unusual. In my opinion, players should not be criticized in the slightest. And then you have to add this. Players, not owners, are being asked to come back and to perform work in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a very dangerous situation, to risk contracting the virus and bringing that back home to their families and so forth. The players are being asked to take on that risk. And as we've seen over the past couple of days, that risk is very real. Just last week, Major League Baseball had to shut down several spring training facilities, in fact, all of their spring training facilities, because multiple players and coaches contracted the virus. On the college level, we saw the University of Houston shut down their athletic department because some of their athletes have contracted the virus. And of course, we saw 20 Clemson football players also came down with the virus. And there's been other instances of athletes contracting the virus. And players are being asked to come back, not just baseball players, but NBA players, NHL players. They're being asked to come back in this uncertain, unstable, dangerous environment and play games. And for the Major League Baseball players to have prorated salaries, part of the agreement, to have already lost billions of dollars, to be asked to put in a full days of pay, but to expect to be paid less than a full day's wage, and then on top of that to say come back and play in the midst of a pandemic, you can understand why the players' position was so strong. But here's the thing, and it comes back to my point that we might have Major League Baseball this year. There have been spikes in several states: Florida, Texas, South Carolina, Arizona, and others. And unlike NHL and the NBA, which are creating domes, and that's not a certainty that that's foolproof at all against this virus. But the Major League Baseball players are not going to be playing in a dome. They're going to be traveling. Now, the schedule is supposed to be a regional schedule, so the travel won't be as extensive as it normally is during a regular season. But nevertheless, players are going to be asked to travel from city to city. And with the spikes that we've seen, and with the high number of young people, and this is what should be getting our attention, the high number of young people who are now contracting the virus. That old thing about when we first started learning about the coronavirus, that somehow this was something that only affected the infirm and the elderly, we now know that's a bunch of garbage, right? That we know now that young people contract this virus. We know now that athletes, the strong and the fit, contract this virus. And so that's out the window. And so when we see the spikes and we see young people contracting the virus and we see athletes contracting the virus and we see all these things happening in our midst, we have to come to the conclusion that for baseball, for the NBA, for the NHL, and any other sport that is trying to come back or start, we have a tough road to climb. A while back, many of those experts dealing with this virus said that the virus will tell us when we can return to our former activities. The virus will tell us. Not negotiations between leagues and players, not pronouncements by commissioners and leagues, not the demand for the return of sports that we're going to hear from fans and from others. That's not going to determine whether we can safely return to normal activities, including the sports we love so much. But what's going to determine it is the virus. The virus will tell us when we can return to our former activities. That was said far and wide. I now believe that to be true now more than at any point before. And the one thing I can say right now, whether it's for baseball, whether it's for the NFL coming up in the fall, college football, NBA basketball, NHL, I'm not sure that the virus has yet given us the green light to return. That's it for me. Brother is out. I'm hoping that we will see baseball soon. I'm hoping we will see basketball soon. But the way things look right now, in terms of this virus and the way it continues to spread, a brother's not so sure. I'll catch you next time. Be well, be safe. Sports 360.